Now I'm being joined by Grandmaster Alexander Donchenko from the Schachfreunde Deizisau. Congratulations for your victory in the Catalan. Can you tell us something about your game?
Yes, I was playing International Master Paul Hoffmann, and I briefly looked at what he plays already a few days ago, and now checked it when the pairings were out. So the game went d4, knight f6, c4, e6, g3, bishop b4 check. This is what he usually plays. After bishop d2, he went a5. This usually leads to some Bogo Indian type structures after some d6, knight d7, and e5 from black, but he decided to transpose to a Catalan after bishop g2, short castle, and knight f3. He went d5 here. Now this transposed to a Catalan line with bishop b4 check, bishop d2, a5, but of course it's all the same here. I went queen c2. I have to defend against d takes c4, and I believe here the main move is c5, which is usually played as a pawn sacrifice. If white takes, black goes d4 and tries to prove that he has enough compensation here with the pawn on d4. But perhaps my opponent didn't expect this line because I usually play knight d2 in response to the check. So here he already started thinking and went knight c6. Okay, apart from the fact that the move looks a little awkward, the idea, I thought at least, is d takes c4 and queen d5. But okay, I have to make a useful move anyway and wait for him to do something. And in this position, I believe he should probably take on c4. I can't take back. I can also play e3, but I wasn't sure if it's really necessary. So if I take and he goes queen d5, I believe queen takes d5 is relatively simple, because the move he would like to make, e takes d5, is met with bishop f4, and he has trouble defending the pawn on c7. Whereas knight d5 is probably simplest to answer with knight c3, and black just doesn't have the same central control as white, and it's quite a pleasant endgame. And usually you don't have to think much beyond that. Still, I believe this is how he should play and keep the position solid, and okay, if he's slightly worse, he just kind of has to endure it. He went knight e4 here. Okay, I believe the idea is to either force me to take on b4 or take with the knight on d2, so he gets the bishop pair. Here is probably the first critical moment, how I respond to this, because it's not actually too bad to allow knight takes d2. I can play any useful move like e3 and allow knight d2, and this position is probably still advantageous for me, but I wasn't sure if I can really do much damage without the bishops, or without my bishop in this case, so I decided to keep them on with bishop e3. The bishop on e3 looks a bit clumsy, but in the end it's better than on c1, and there aren't too many squares available. I didn't want to put it on f4 because he can offer an exchange with bishop d6, and that's what I wanted to avoid in the first place. So after bishop e3, there's a threat of c5 trapping the bishop, so he went back to e7. The idea behind this is, in case of bishop d6, I still go knight c3, and he already has to do something about the pawn on d5. While in the game, he managed to keep the pawn on d5 for some time. So he went back to e7, and I went knight c3, challenging the knight. And okay, he has a choice here. He can take on c3 right away and give me a choice again to take with the queen or pawn. I believe I would have taken with the pawn anyway, with similar ideas to the game, but basically black is a tempo up. I'm not sure if it changes a whole lot, but I think the position is still very nice for white. I believe he just maybe misunderstood my idea because he forced me to take on c3 in better circumstances with the pawn. Maybe he thought that I'll want to take on back with a piece anyway, but this is why I think knight b4 is an imprecise move, because after queen b1, he can't really hold the knight on e4 and has to take. B takes c3, knight c6. And now I could, of course, play queen c2 and get the same position that we had before, but queen c2 is not a very tempting move here. So this here again, I think I made a very important choice. The basic idea, what I want to do, is probably play something like knight d2, bishop f4, e4. But of course, I can't manage all of it, and his only, at least the only dangerous idea that I saw, is connected with a4 and knight a5. To create some kind of grip on the light squares. So I decided to go a4 myself. And here If he takes on c4, I just go knight d2 and win the pawn back with quite a large advantage. So he doesn't really have a concrete way to deal with this, and is still forced to play a passive move. He went bishop f6 here, perhaps not the most natural, but he wants to at least try to go e5. If he went b6, which is, I believe, the most straightforward, then I go knight d2, and it's very difficult for him to hold the pawn on d5. A move like, let's say, bishop a6 could simply be met with queen a2, and I believe white will actually win a pawn sooner rather than later. So he played bishop f6 here. It also has the point that after an eventual b6, he has a move like knight e7, protecting the pawn. So if I, for example, place some move like h4, which I also considered, he can just go b6. And after a move like knight d2, go knight e7. It still doesn't look very pretty, but he gets all his pieces out, and I can't really crash through in the center. And let's say I probably spoiled my advantage a little bit here. So, no, pawn is still here. I decided to go bishop f4. Okay, apart from the fact that knight d2 is met with e5, or no, actually it's not. No, e5 allows de. So knight d2 was the other move, yes. But I already considered my active options here, and I saw that the only idea I really have to play in any case is e2 e4. So I decided to free up the e-pawn with bishop f4. In all of these lines, d takes c4 is usually not a good idea, again because of knight d2. But here there's actually an exception to this. After d takes c4, which is probably the critical move, which he could have played, he instead went rook e8, I believe. Here after dc, I don't go knight d2 because it allows e5, but I go e4. And now if he allows me to go e5, I will probably be strategically winning, say after something like b6, e5, bishop e7, and knight d2. I will win the pawn back, but I don't even need to win it back. It's just that black has no counterplay whatsoever because of his very, very bad pawn structure here. That's why here he should have gone, okay, if he played for this, he should have gone e5, the pawn on b7, e5, d takes e5 and bishop e7. This still looks quite bad for black, perhaps, because he will need to waste another move on b6 to develop the bishop. But after something like rook d1, queen e8, even if he loses the c4 pawn, these pawns on e4 and e5 are actually obstructing all my pieces, and it's not so easy to make progress here with white. At least that's what I thought. But okay, I have other options as well, but e4 is the most straightforward. So he didn't go d takes c4, he went rook e8. Now, of course, let's say I want to go e4 as soon as possible, so that's what I did. He took on e4 again to prevent e4, e5, and queen takes e4. I believe here it's fair to say that white has achieved quite a total success, because he didn't allow any counterplay, has a space advantage, and can play on basically any side of the board. And black is more or less forced to wait passively and hope to somehow alleviate the pressure. He went bishop d7. The idea is, maybe not immediately, but later on, to play knight e7 and bishop c6 to get the bishop out and perhaps exchange some pieces. I went h4 here. There are many other moves like rook e1 or rook b1, rook d1, but h4 seemed like the move I will have to play anyway, because I want to develop an initiative on the king's side. He went h6 here rather quickly. I am not entirely sure that this is the way to go, because h6 also weakens his king. I considered rook b8 during the game as the move to prepare knight e7, and I wanted to go knight g5 here. He probably doesn't want to part with his dark squared bishop, so he would have gone g6, and now my idea was rook fe1, kind of keeping up the pressure, and I believe that e5 doesn't work here on account of queen d5, when the threat on f7 is quite nasty, and I think I should still have a big advantage here. If he doesn't play e5, then again I made some small progress, I provoked g6 and still don't allow any counterplay. So I believe rook b8 was probably a better way to defend, but h6 is of course also not losing on the spot yet. I went rook e1, more out of general principle than anything else, because you don't really calculate lines in a position like this, especially when both players were already quite low on time. We were not playing as particularly fast, and okay, rook e1 is just a move you like to make. He played queen c8, and I went h5 here. I already had the idea of bishop f1, d3 in mind, and wanted to take away the square on g6. So if I play bishop f1 here, it allows knight e7, and after bishop d3, knight g6, he will have time to play bishop c6 and kick my queen away. That's the point behind h5. And while the bishop is still on g2, it's not too dangerous, because after any move like knight e7, first of all, he doesn't have the g6 square anymore, and I can simply go knight e5. After which he's there are no strong direct threats yet, but the position is still quite overwhelming for white. I believe here he went rook a6. This move looks very odd, and I'm not sure why he did this. Perhaps still knight e7 and knight e5 would have been the lesser evil. But after rook a6, this very much invites me to go bishop f1, also perhaps targeting the rook later on. And okay, he went knight e7, because now as it stands, he can no longer protect the diagonal and has to allow my queen to h7. After bishop d3, he went king f8, but I think, okay, the critical line, so to speak, is knight f5. When I play g4, bishop c6, I go d5, and here the best try for black is to go back with the bishop to d7, because ed allows queen takes f5. After bishop d7, the situation is quite curious. gf would be a huge blunder on account of ef, and the queen is trapped. So I would have to find some calm move here, and I believe that bishop e5 was what I had planned to free up the square on f4. And here I think it's more or less forced that black plays ed, cd, bishop e5, knight e5, and f6 to somehow stay afloat. And okay, I obviously have a lot of moves here, but I thought that perhaps even f4 might work. But okay, I would have taken the time to figure it out, if it works or not, with the idea of just f takes e5, f takes e5. And basically the whole black position is hanging, and the knight on f5 cannot really move away. So this was perhaps the way to resolve the tension right away, but what he did was actually also quite a good practical try, because although the position looks very bad, it's not easy to deliver a knockout blow there. So after bishop d3, he went king f8. I go queen h7, because bishop c6 is a threat here. And he went knight g8. Now, of course, the black king looks rather unsafe, but again, it's not easy to do something decisive here. Any fancy idea like bishop c1 is not really to the point yet, because he could simply play bishop e7 at any point. So what did I do here? I believe I went c5. Oh, I think the pawn is still here. I went c5. Maybe here there is the point to look for some very direct way to end the game. Perhaps knight e5 takes f6 and something like rook e4. And maybe the white attack is decisive, but I just didn't feel like there's a need to force matters here. Perhaps I was wrong, because I was also getting low on time, and it's difficult to really finish a game off once you are down to a few minutes. So I went c5 here, and here I have to compliment him. He made a very good practical decision. If he moves the rook to a8, then probably I will go knight e5, and everything will be very similar to what I just showed. But he went bishop c6. He rightly understood that the rook on a6 is not worth the bishop on d3, so he just allows me to take it. Instead he organizes his own counterplay here on the light squares. Okay, first of all, the knight is hanging, so I still have to go knight e5. Takes. Here I took with the bishop after a few minutes of consideration, because I think d takes e5 is also very interesting, with the idea of just keep the position under total control. The point being queen d7, bishop c4. I don't allow any kind of invasion with the queen, and probably I will play rook d1 soon, and still I will have to find some knockout punch, but I don't think black has any counterplay, so perhaps this was a better choice, especially in time trouble, because black simply doesn't have many ideas there. But I went bishop e5, f6, bishop f4. And here, okay, black again ignores the hanging rook and goes queen d7, trying to create threats against my king. I played bishop c4 here. Again, the bishop is worth much more than the rook, and as long as I keep the queen back in his camp, I should still be strategically winning here. He played bishop f3, which is also a good move because, first of all, he threatens the pawn on h5, and I have to, let's say, do something active. I'm not allowed to play rook e3, rook ae1, and just, let's say, win by playing simple moves. Because here, let's say rook e3, bishop h5, rook e1. Apart from the fact that, okay, I wanted to say g5, but the g pawn is actually pinned. But he could still go bishop f7, and now all I've managed to do is lose a pawn, and I still have to prove my point here. I can always take the exchange, but it weakens my lat squares so much that it's almost never a good idea. So after bishop f3, I decided that I should take the exchange and try to get a grip on the lat squares. I played queen d3, more or less forcing bishop takes h5. And now I took on a6, ba, and I played queen e4. I don't want to allow the bishop back to the long diagonal. And okay, I have ideas such as queen b7 here, and keeping the pressure on e6 so he doesn't have moves like knight e7. He went g5, which I believe is also the best move. He needs to get his pawns going, and he also forces my bishop to a more passive square. I played c6 here. I'm already preparing to place the bishop on the diagonal a3 f8. Perhaps there is, let's say, a more convincing way to do this here, but I was already very low on time, and I was just kind of hoping that I will be faster here, collecting everything on the queen side. He went queen f7, bishop c1, bishop g6, and queen e2. This is, I believe, also a critical position. I'm obviously an exchange up, and given one or two moves, I will collect all the pawns on the queen side and probably win comfortably. I'm not quite sure what he should do here. He went king g7. Perhaps this is still, let's say, okay. And I took on a6. And somewhere around here, he should probably start pushing his pawns with something like h5, because the way he played it, it just allowed me too much time to push the a pawn and create play of my own. Perhaps also here he played knight e7, which might not be bad, and after queen a5, he might try some tricky move like bishop h5. Now again, the bishop wants to go back to f3, and there is no easy way to prevent it. This was an idea I actually saw, and I thought that here I might play something like, like queen takes c7, bishop f3, and now rook e3, trying to give back the exchange if he plays queen h5. But perhaps this is actually a bad idea, and would have been a mistake in time trouble, because you can just take on c6. And if you are down to, let's say, 2 minutes on the clock, then it's very tricky to play this position. Perhaps I am forced to play something like g4, but obviously with the clock ticking, this is very good compensation for black. So this was probably the best practical try, and then it's up to me to find some convincing way to refute this. So yes, knight e7, queen a5, but he took on c6. And it seems this is something a waste of time, because the pawn is not really relevant. He either creates something strong on the king side, or he goes down. And here, after queen b5, he has to defend the knight again, or move it away. He chose queen d7. And now I played a5. The a pawn is kind of my trump, and when you have no time, it's easy to just push the pawn and make sure that no direct threats exist. Rook b8. He has to do something about the pin. Queen e2, e5. Okay, he's playing actively, but this is already move 38, I believe. I played a6 here. And here he played e takes d4, which is a rather unfortunate choice. perhaps he can create more problems with some other move like bishop f7. And okay, I will have to think after the time control. Maybe I will play a7, or maybe I will play bishop e3. But it's actually all not so simple, because once he plays bishop d5 after any move I make, except for a7, I will always have to be with my guard up against threats of queen h3. So here the game would have continued and would have perhaps been quite unclear. But he played e takes d4, and this was move 40, and fortunately I saw that it allows me to play queen e6. Queen e6 actually works out very nicely and ends the game more or less on the spot, but even if it didn't, I take the queens off, and no matter if I stay a pawn down or not, I'll be in exchange up, and with the a pawn it should always easily be winning. I believe he played bishop f5 and resigned after queen d7. Okay, he obviously would have recaptured otherwise, and after c takes d4, there's just an equal number of pawns, and the a pawn will decide the game easily. But of course, it doesn't seem like I, let's say, converted the advantage in a convincing way. Still, I'm quite happy with the first half of the game I played.
Thank you very much for this deep dive in your Catalan game. You made a lot of progress in the last months. You are on the direct road to a 2700 player. What is your magic sauce? How do you train?
Okay, 2.7 is maybe still a little off. I wouldn't be so optimistic. It's a long way, but basically, I believe that players with, let's say, 2550 to 26, they don't really play much worse than players with 2650. It's just that once you get to a higher level, you have fewer days off. You don't really mess up. You make people beat you, and you don't give away free points. It's I wouldn't say I'm a much better player than I was a year ago. It's just that I'm not giving many things away. Sometimes it still happens, but let's say the baseline of how I play has risen quite a bit, and even if I play a bad game, I still might not lose it to a more or less decent opponent. And this is basically the key to not, let's say, drop what you've gained, because many players, even below 2600, sometimes score a performance of about 27, but then again, in the next tournament, they might score a 24 performance, and this is what you have to avoid. You just have to force yourself to kind of stay in the game even if you don't feel like it.
Consistent performances are important, and what do you think, as which field in chess makes the difference at this level? Is it the opening preparation, tactics, endgames?
Okay, I believe that even in top tournaments you see that if you really hit the opening preparation, it can make a huge difference. But on average, of course, I wouldn't say that I'm much better prepared than before, because it just it's very hard to guess something like this in advance. But I believe it's actually once you start rising above what you had before, it also boosts your confidence strangely. Although maybe you understand that it's not due to great play or something, but still, if you see the results are coming, you understand that perhaps you are just doing well, and it helps you make decisions faster. In the end, at this level, it's all about small things like, do I decide on a move in 10 minutes or in 3? Or do I play this move or the other? And these things accumulate over a whole game. And at one point, they may be enough to win the game. At another point, they may not be. And once you get there, it's you just kind of, the confidence helps you to really make a lot of good decisions there. It sounds a bit awkward, but there is really no magic recipe. It's all parts of the game are just flowing a little smoother.
Did you learn all these skills autodidactically, or did you have some chess trainers which supported you on that way?
Okay, I never had a permanent coach like many people have over a few years. One big thing that helped me is that my father is an international master. So basically, at home, whenever I was still at a relatively low level, I could come ask help from him, and he could at least, even if he couldn't help me a lot in concrete preparation later on, he still has great chess knowledge, and basically he was he could always sort of coach me, but not really. It's more of a let's say loose cooperation. And apart from that, I would say it's mostly self-learned. I always try to play a lot of strong tournaments.
Father-son teams are always good. Also we have seen it with Magnus Carlsen and his father. I think it's similar with your father.
Okay, perhaps I would say both my parents, because my father, for all his chess knowledge, he's I wouldn't say he's good at organizing anything. So that credit goes to my mother, and also my sister and many of my friends. It's always a team effort, and you don't really appreciate it until something goes wrong there. So something like this is of course essential.
A lot of strong tournaments are ahead of you. What about the Grenke Chess Open 2020? Do you consider it to play there?
Let's say I used to consider it until very recently, but I have found that somehow in the last months I do not take double rounds well anymore. It's probably just a thing of concentration. I'm just not used to playing double rounds anymore. I could, let's say, restructure it to do it again, but I would like to avoid this if possible.
For sure, this is really tough, and on that level, 2,650, it's maybe more convenient to only play one round per day, and you can make a deeper and better preparation.
It's not only about the preparation; it's just that I'm not really prepared to play more than one game on a high level. I could, let's say, kind of divide my attention to 2 games, but then, of course, I will not be able to dive deeply into any one of them. And this is what I usually try to do nowadays, which is why I don't like double rounds anymore.
Crystal clear. And there is the FIDE Rapid and Blitz World Chess Championship in Moscow in the end of this year. Will you play there?
I'm considering it, but it still depends on, let's say, when the last details will be published, because so far I cannot even apply for a visa, and I play a tournament right before it starts. So I would have to do all of this on a schedule if all the information comes out in time. If it does, I would probably like to play.
Okay, we will look forward to watch your games there. We have another topic and a lot of questions from chess fans. Chess as an e-sport. A lot of strong chess players started in the recent months, recent years with streaming online chess on Twitch. What do you think about it, and do you stream yourself?
Okay, first of all, no, I don't stream, but it's more of a thing that if I start with something, I will probably get too much into it, and I believe that that's also one of the risks. If you are a professional player and get into streaming, then you really get into streaming and might neglect your other duties, so to speak. But in general, I think the presentation and that the chess players can, let's say, show themselves to a wider audience like this, that's a very good thing, because in modern times you have to adapt, and streaming chess is provided there's the good commentary, it's a very entertaining way to make chess accessible.
Really cool. And I've seen you played at the Chess24 Banter tournament. This is streaming or not? Or
this is streaming, but let's say it's not like I have my own channel. It's just I'm part of a tournament, and I commentate during the games. But let's say it's my very first experience in actually playing chess and streaming while I do it. I wouldn't say it's a regular thing, and it's not really my initiative, but Chess24 just provided the opportunity there.
Really cool. And do you think that too much online chess and too much playing quicker time controls, shorter time controls can harm your classical chess skill?
I think only if you really do it excessively, like playing bullet for hours every day. But in general, I think I could perhaps use to play more online chess. I don't really do that a lot, but it's always about a healthy mix, like with most other things. And in case of online chess, I think it shouldn't really hurt you unless you, again, get obsessed with it. But many top players do it, and many top players still do quite well, obviously. So I don't think there's a harmful effect.
Thank you very much for the interview. I wish you all the best for your game tomorrow.
Thank you.